The lantern swung in Michael Dalton's hand as he pushed open the barn door that October night in 1876, expecting to find a raccoon or maybe a stray coyote. But instead, his light fell upon a young woman huddled in the corner of an empty horse stall, her dress torn and muddy, her dark eyes wide with terror. She scrambled backward against the rough wooden planks, raising one trembling hand as if to shield herself from a blow. Michael froze, his own hand instinctively moving away from the pistol at his hip. He was a tall man, weathered by 30 years of hard living on the California frontier, and he knew how frightening he must look to her in the flickering shadows. "Easy now," he said softly, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "I am not going to hurt you." The woman stared at him for a long moment, her chest heaving with rapid breaths. She looked to be in her early 20s, with long brown hair that had fallen loose from its pins, and a face that might have been pretty if it were not streaked with dirt and bruises. One eye was swollen, the skin around it darkening to purple. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please do not send me back." Michael set the lantern down slowly on a barrel and held both hands up where she could see them. "Send you back where?" She flinched at the question, her eyes darting toward the barn door as if expecting someone to burst through it at any moment. "To my husband, to Garrett Lewis. Please, I would rather die out here than go back to that house." The name meant nothing to Michael, but the fear in her voice and the bruises on her face told him everything he needed to know. He had seen it before, though not often, in Knight's Ferry, the small mining town tucked into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada where he had settled 3 years ago. Women who stayed with brutal men because they had nowhere else to go, no other options in a world that offered them precious few. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Deanna," she said after a moment's hesitation. "Deanna Lewis." "Well, Deanna Lewis, I am Michael Dalton, and this is my barn on my property. You are safe here." He glanced at the hay scattered around her, the old saddle blanket she had pulled over herself for warmth. "How long have you been hiding out here?" "Since this afternoon." "I waited until he passed out from drinking, and then I ran. I did not know where else to go. The town is too small. Everyone knows everyone. But I saw your ranch from the road, set back in the trees, and I thought maybe." She trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself. Michael thought for a moment, weighing his options. The smart thing would be to take her into town in the morning, let the sheriff sort it out. But he had met Sheriff Porter, a man more concerned with keeping the peace than with justice, and he could easily imagine him returning Deanna to her husband with a stern warning that would only make things worse for her once they were alone. "Are you hungry?" Michael asked. Deanna blinked at him, surprised by the question. Yes. Come up to the house. I will fix you something to eat and we can figure out what to do." "You are not going to send me back, not tonight," Michael said. "Tonight you can rest and eat and be safe. Tomorrow we will worry about tomorrow." She stood slowly, testing whether this was some kind of trick, but Michael simply picked up his lantern and walked toward the barn door, moving slowly enough that she could follow at her own pace. After a moment, he heard her footsteps behind him on the packed earth floor. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine trees from the surrounding hills. Michael's ranch house was modest, a sturdy 2-room cabin he had built himself from timber cut on his own land. He had 40 acres here, with a small herd of cattle and a few horses. It was not much, but it was his, bought with money he had saved from years of working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas. Inside, he lit another lamp and gestured for Deanna to sit at the rough-hewn table, while he stoked the fire in the stone hearth and set about preparing food. He had leftover stew from his supper, which he warmed in a pot over the flames, and he sliced bread from a loaf he had bought in town 2 days earlier. Deanna watched him with wary eyes, sitting rigidly in the chair as if ready to bolt at any moment. When he set the bowl of stew and plate of bread in front of her, she stared at it for a long moment before picking up the spoon with trembling hands. She ate slowly at first, then more quickly, as if she had not eaten in days. Perhaps she had not, Michael thought. He poured her a cup of water from the pitcher on his counter and sat down across from her, giving her space but staying close enough that she would know she was not alone. "How long have you been married to him?" Michael asked when she had finished eating. 6 months, Deanna said quietly, setting down her spoon. "My father arranged it. He owned a dry goods store in San Francisco and Garrett was one of his suppliers. When my father died last year, Garrett said he would take care of me, that I would want for nothing." She laughed bitterly. "I was so foolish. I thought he was being kind. I did not realize until after the wedding what kind of man he truly was. And your mother, she died when I was 12. I have no other family, no brothers or sisters. It was just me and my father, and when he passed." She shook her head. "I had no money of my own, no prospects. Marrying Garrett seemed like the only option." Michael had heard similar stories before. Women were left so vulnerable in this world, dependent on fathers and husbands for everything. It was not right, but it was the way things were, and changing it seemed as impossible as stopping the sun from rising. "Why did you come to Knight's Ferry?" he asked. "Garrett bought a lumber mill here 3 months ago. He said there was money to be made with all the mining operations in the area. We moved from San Francisco and I thought—" She swallowed hard. "I thought maybe things would be different here, that he would be different, but he only got worse. The drinking, the rages. Last night he beat me because I burned the roast beef. Tonight it was because I spoke to another man at the general store. Just spoke to him, nothing more, but Garrett was convinced I was being unfaithful." Michael felt anger rising in his chest, hot and fierce. He was not a violent man by nature. He had done his share of fighting in his younger years, enough to know that he was good at it and that it solved very little in the end. But men who hurt women, who used their strength against those weaker than themselves, they made him see red. "You cannot go back to him," Michael said firmly. "But what choice do I have?" Deanna's eyes filled with tears. "I have no money, nowhere to go. If I stay here, he will find me. Knight's Ferry is too small. And even if I could get away, where would I go? How would I survive?" "We will figure something out," Michael said, though he had no idea what that something might be. "For now, you need rest. You can sleep in my bed. I will take the floor out here by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Deanna protested. "You can and you will," Michael said. "You are injured and exhausted. I have slept on harder floors than this one, I promise you." Deanna looked like she wanted to argue further, but exhaustion won out. Michael showed her to his small bedroom, where he kept a simple bed frame with a cornhusk mattress and wool blankets. He gave her one of his clean shirts to sleep in, and left her alone to change, returning to the main room to make up a pallet by the fire. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling beams and listening to the occasional sound from the bedroom. He heard Deanna crying softly once, and it took all his willpower not to go to her to offer comfort. But he knew she needed space, needed to feel safe and not crowded by a strange man, even one trying to help. Michael was no stranger to loneliness. He had lived alone since coming to Knight's Ferry, preferring his own company to the complications that came with getting too close to people. He had been married once, a lifetime ago it seemed, back in Texas. Mary had been her name, a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch. They had been young, barely 18, and so full of plans for their future together. Then the fever came, sweeping through the county like a scythe, and within a week Mary was gone, along with dozens of others. After that, Michael had thrown himself into work, into the cattle drives that took him away from Texas and all its painful memories. He had drifted for years, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots, until he finally saved enough money to buy this land and build this house. He had thought he might find peace here in the California hills, but peace was proving elusive. Now there was Deanna Lewis, hiding from a violent husband, looking at Michael with desperate hope in her eyes as if he could somehow save her from a world that offered women like her so few protections. He wanted to tell her he was not the man for the job, that he was just a rancher trying to live quietly and avoid trouble. But those words would not come, not when he looked at her bruised face and remembered the fear in her voice. Please do not send me back. No, he would not send her back. Whatever else happened, he would not do that. Morning came too quickly. Michael woke to gray dawn light filtering through the windows and the smell of coffee brewing. He sat up, confused for a moment, then saw Deanna moving quietly around the main room, pouring coffee into tin cups. She had found his extra clothes, a pair of his old trousers and a work shirt, both far too large for her slender frame. She had rolled up the sleeves and cinched the trousers with a length of rope, and her hair was pulled back in a simple braid. "I hope you do not mind," she said, gesturing at the clothes. "My dress was torn beyond repair." "No, that is fine," Michael said, standing and folding the blankets he had used. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Deanna admitted. "Thank you for your kindness, Michael. I know you did not have to help me. I could not just turn you out," he said, accepting the cup of coffee she offered him. "We need to think about what comes next, though. Your husband will be looking for you, I know." Deanna's face paled. "He will be furious. Garrett cannot stand to lose anything he considers his property, and that is what I am to him. Property." "You are not anyone's property," Michael said firmly. "You are a person with your own rights." "The law does not see it that way," Deanna said quietly. "A wife belongs to her husband in every way that matters. If he finds me here, he could have you arrested for harboring me, or worse." Michael had not thought of that, but she was right. The law was firmly on the side of husbands, even brutal ones. A man could beat his wife with impunity in most places, and anyone who interfered risked serious consequences. "Then we will have to make sure he does not find you here," Michael said. "At least not right away. Give me time to think of a plan." Before Deanna could respond, they both heard the sound of horses approaching the house. Multiple horses, moving fast. Michael set down his coffee cup and moved to the window, peering out carefully. His stomach dropped when he saw 5 men riding up the path toward his cabin, led by a well-dressed man on a black horse. "Is one of them your husband?" Michael asked. Deanna had gone white as a sheet. She moved to the window and looked out, then let out a small gasp. "That is him. The one in front, wearing the gray suit, and he brought men with him." Michael recognized 2 of the men as workers from the lumber mill on the edge of town. The other 2 wore gun belts slung low on their hips, the mark of hired guns. Garrett Lewis was clearly a man who believed in overwhelming force. "Get in the bedroom and stay quiet," Michael said urgently. "No matter what you hear, do not come out unless I call for you. Do you understand?" Deanna nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "He will hurt you." "Let me worry about that," Michael said. "Go. Now." Deanna disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Michael took a deep breath, checked that his pistol was loaded and in its holster, and stepped outside onto the porch to face the approaching riders. The 5 men reined in their horses about 20 feet from the house. Garrett Lewis was indeed wearing a fine gray suit, probably worth more than everything Michael owned. He was a handsome man in his late 30s, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard, but his eyes were cold and calculating as they swept over Michael and the property. "Morning," Michael said evenly. "Something I can help you with?" "I am looking for my wife," Garrett said, his voice cultured and polite but with an edge of steel underneath. "Deanna Lewis. Brown hair, about 5 feet 4 inches tall. She is not well, you see. She gets confused sometimes, wanders off. I am worried about her." "Have not seen anyone matching that description," Michael said, keeping his face neutral. "You might try asking in town." "I already did," Garrett said. "Several people mentioned seeing her heading in this direction yesterday. Running, actually, as if she were frightened of something." "You are sure you have not seen her?" "I am sure." Garrett studied Michael for a long moment, then smiled, though the expression did not reach his eyes. "You understand, I am very worried. I would hate for anything to happen to Deanna. She is not in her right mind. She might hurt herself or someone else. It would be better for everyone if I could just take her home where she will be safe." "I told you, I have not seen her," Michael repeated. One of the hired guns, a scarred man with a drooping mustache, spoke up. "Maybe we should take a look around, boss." "Make sure." "That would be trespassing," Michael said quietly. "I would have to ask you to leave." The hired gun's hand moved toward his pistol. "What are you going to do about it, Cowboy?" "Ray, please," Garrett said smoothly, holding up a hand. "No need for unpleasantness, I am sure Mr. Dalton. Michael Dalton. I am sure Mr. Dalton here is telling the truth. After all, he would have no reason to lie, would he?" Garrett's eyes bored into Michael. "Harboring another man's wife is a serious crime. It could lead to all sorts of legal troubles, financial troubles, even violence if the husband were angry enough. I am a reasonable man, Mr. Dalton, but I have my limits." "I understand," Michael said, "but I still have not seen your wife. Now I have work to do, so unless there is anything else, I would appreciate it if you would leave my property." Garrett stared at him for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But if you do happen to see Deanna, I would consider it a personal favor if you would let me know immediately. I am staying at the Grand Hotel in town. I am prepared to be very generous to anyone who helps me find my wife." "I will keep that in mind," Michael said. The 5 men turned their horses and rode back down the path, though Michael noticed they did not head back toward town. Instead, they stopped about a half-mile down the road, barely visible through the trees, clearly keeping watch on the property. Michael went back inside and found Deanna standing in the bedroom doorway, her face ashen. "He knows I am here," she whispered. "He is just waiting for proof." "Then we will have to be careful," Michael said. He posted men on the road to watch the house. "You will not be able to leave without being seen." "I have put you in danger," Deanna said, tears streaming down her face. "I should just go back to him. It is not worth you getting hurt over this." "No," Michael said firmly, taking her by the shoulders and looking into her eyes. "You are not going back to that man. We will find another way." "There is no other way," Deanna said despairedly. "You see how it is. He has money, he has men. I am just his property that ran away, and everyone will side with him because that is how the law works. I am trapped." Michael's mind raced, trying to think of options. They could try to get Deanna out at night, smuggle her to another town, but Garrett's men would likely spot them. Even if they made it to Sacramento or San Francisco, Garrett could follow and claim his legal rights as her husband. The law was entirely on his side. Unless Deanna was not his wife anymore, the thought struck Michael suddenly. "What if you were not married to him anymore?" he said slowly. "What if you had grounds for divorce?" Deanna shook her head. "Divorce is nearly impossible to obtain, especially for a woman. It takes money I do not have, lawyers, proof of the most extreme cruelty or adultery. Garrett is too smart to let anyone witness what he does behind closed doors." "But what if there were another option?" Michael said. "What if you married someone else? Deanna stared at him. I am already married. And bigamy is illegal. Not if your first marriage was dissolved, Michael said, the plan taking shape in his mind. There is a judge in Sacramento, Judge Harrison. I met him a few years back when I had some trouble over property lines. He is a fair man, not like some of the corrupt officials around here. If we could get to him, tell him what Garrett has done to you, show him the bruises, maybe he would grant a divorce or annulment. Even if he would, how would we get to Sacramento without Garrett stopping us? Deanna asked. It is a 2-day ride from here. There is another route, Michael said. Through the mountains. It is rougher terrain, takes longer, but there are old mining trails that Garrett and his men probably do not know about. We could leave tonight after dark, go on foot through the woods until we are far enough away to risk taking horses. That is too dangerous, Deanna protested. It is almost November. There could be snow in the high passes. And what about your ranch? You cannot just abandon it. My neighbor, Sam Wheeler, owes me a favor. I will ride over there this afternoon while it is still light, ask him to look after my animals for a week or so. As for the danger, I have been through those mountains before. I know the trails. Deanna looked at him with wonder and something else, something softer. Why are you doing this? You do not even know me. Because it is the right thing to do, Michael said simply, and because no one should have to live in fear the way you have been living. They spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey. Michael carefully packed supplies into 2 leather knapsacks: dried meat, hardtack, coffee, blankets, matches, his father's old compass. He cleaned and loaded both his pistol and his rifle, hoping they would not need them, but knowing they might. Diana found an old coat of his that fit reasonably well, and he gave her a hat to hide her distinctive hair. In the afternoon, Michael saddled his horse and rode openly down the path toward Sam Wheeler's ranch, making sure Garrett's watchers saw him leaving alone. Sam was a grizzled cattleman in his 60s who had helped Michael when he first arrived in Knight's Ferry, teaching him which grazing lands were best and how to deal with the occasional mountain lion. When Michael explained that he needed to go to Sacramento for a week and would Sam mind looking after his place, the older man agreed without prying into the reasons. "You are not in any trouble, are you, son?" Sam asked as Michael prepared to leave. "Nothing I cannot handle," Michael said. "That man Garrett Lewis rode by here this morning with some hard-looking characters," Sam said. "Said he was looking for his wife. You would not know anything about that, would you?" Michael met Sam's eyes steadily. "If you did know something, what would you do?" Sam was quiet for a moment, then spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Lewis bought up the Patterson ranch last month, paid half what it was worth, then had his lawyers find some clause in the deed that meant old man Patterson had to sell or face foreclosure. Patterson and his wife are living in a 1-room shack in town now, barely scraping by. I guess what I am saying is, if someone wanted to cause Lewis some grief, I would not lose much sleep over it." "I appreciate you looking after my place," Michael said, shaking Sam's hand. "You be careful in Sacramento," Sam said meaningfully. "It is a big city. Easy to disappear there if a person wanted to." Michael rode back to his ranch as the sun was setting, once again making sure the watchers saw him return alone. Inside the house, Diana had been busy. She had cooked a large meal, which they ate while there was still light, knowing it might be their last hot food for days. She had also found some of Michael's older clothes and modified them to fit her better, using his sewing kit to take in the waist and shorten the legs. "You are good with a needle," Michael observed, watching her work. "My mother was a seamstress before she married my father," Deanna said. "She taught me when I was young. It is one of the few skills I have that might actually be useful out here." "You have more useful skills than you think," Michael said. You are brave, for one thing. Not many people would run from a situation like yours. Most would just accept it. I did accept it for months, Deanna said quietly. Every time he hit me, I told myself it would get better, that I just needed to be a better wife, do things the way he wanted. It took me so long to realize that nothing I did would ever be good enough because the problem was not me. It was him. You know that now, though, Michael said. That is what matters. As full darkness fell, they extinguished all the lamps and sat in silence for an hour, letting their eyes adjust to the darkness. Michael peered out the window regularly, studying the distant point where he knew Garrett's men were watching. He could just barely make out the glow of their campfire through the trees. "We will go out the back window of the bedroom," Michael whispered to Deanna. "It faces away from where they are watching. We will head straight into the woods and keep going west for at least 2 miles before we turn north. That should put us well away from any watchers." Deanna nodded, her face pale but determined in the faint moonlight coming through the window. Michael shouldered both packs and his rifle, then helped Deanna climb through the bedroom window, lowering her gently to the ground before following. They moved as quietly as possible through the darkness, heading away from the house into the shelter of the pine forest. The going was slow at first. The moon provided some light, but not enough to see clearly, and they had to pick their way carefully over roots and rocks. Michael led the way, with Deanna staying close behind him, one hand occasionally touching his back to keep her bearings. They did not speak, knowing sound carried far on the still night air. After what seemed like hours but was probably only one, Michael finally allowed them to stop for a brief rest. They were on a steep hillside now, well away from his ranch with nothing but wilderness surrounding them. Deanna was breathing hard from the exertion, not used to this kind of physical effort. "Are you all right?" Michael whispered. "I think so," Deanna whispered back. "How much farther do we have to go tonight?" "A few more miles at least. I want to be well clear of this area before dawn, just in case they try to track us. There is an old mining camp I know of where we can hole up during the day and rest. We will do most of our traveling at night until we are far enough away that we can risk moving in daylight." They pressed on through the darkness. Michael's legs remembered the rhythm of this kind of travel, the careful placement of each foot, the constant awareness of surroundings. He had done his share of moving through hostile territory during his cattle drive days, whether it was avoiding raiders or hostile tribes, or just trying to get to water sources before competing outfits. This felt similar, that same sense of danger lurking just out of sight. Deanna proved tougher than she looked. Despite her exhaustion and fear, she kept up without complaint, never asking to stop or slow down. Michael found himself impressed by her determination. He had known men who would have given up already, gone back to face whatever consequences awaited rather than endure this harsh trek through the mountains. Dawn was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky when they finally reached the old mining camp Michael had been aiming for. It was little more than a collapsed wooden structure and a few pieces of rusted equipment, remnants of the gold rush that had brought so many people to California 25 years earlier. But the collapsed building provided enough shelter to hide them from view, and there was a small stream nearby for water. They crawled into the partial shelter and finally allowed themselves to rest. Deanna's face was scratched from tree branches, and her hands were bleeding from several places where she had caught herself while climbing over rocks, but she smiled at Michael with genuine warmth. "We made it," she said softly. "The first part, anyway," Michael said. "We still have a long way to go." They ate cold jerky and hardtack, not daring to light a fire that might give away their position. Then Michael spread out one of the blankets and gestured for Deanna to lie down. "You should sleep. I will keep watch." "You need rest too," Deanna protested. "I will sleep later," Michael said. "Right now, I need to make sure no one followed us." Deanna looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. She curled up on the blanket, and within minutes she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Michael sat with his back against a rock, his rifle across his knees, and watched the surrounding forest for any sign of pursuit. The morning passed slowly. Birds called in the trees, and Michael occasionally saw a deer moving through the undergrowth, but there was no sign of humans. That was good, but he knew better than to relax his vigilance. Garrett Lewis struck him as a stubborn man, someone who would not give up easily. Around midday, Deanna woke and they switched places, with Michael finally allowing himself to sleep while she kept watch. He dreamed of Texas, of Mary, of a life that seemed impossibly distant now. When he woke a few hours later, Deanna was sitting exactly where he had left her, staring out at the forest with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked. Deanna startled slightly, then smiled. "I was thinking about how strange it is. 2 days ago, my biggest worry was what to cook for dinner and whether it would meet Garrett's approval. Now, I am sitting in a ruined mining shack in the middle of the wilderness, wearing men's clothes and running for my life. It feels like a completely different world." "Do you regret it?" Michael asked. "Running, I mean." "No," Deanna said firmly. "Even if we do not make it to Sacramento, even if Garrett catches us, I would rather have these few days of freedom than spend the rest of my life in that house with him." "We will make it," Michael said. "I promise you that." They waited until dusk before moving on, following game trails and old mining roads that led deeper into the Sierra Nevada. The terrain grew rougher, with steeper climbs and more treacherous footing. Michael set a slower pace now, knowing that an injury out here could be fatal. Deanna followed gamely, though he could tell she was in pain from muscles unused to this kind of exertion. On the second night, they reached an elevation high enough that frost covered the ground and their breath misted in the cold air. Michael finally allowed them to make a small fire in a protected hollow, knowing Deanna needed warmth more than they needed to stay completely hidden. They huddled close to the flames, sharing the other blanket around their shoulders. "Tell me about yourself," Deanna said as they waited for coffee to heat over the fire. "I know your name and that you are a rancher, but not much else." Michael was silent for a moment, not used to talking about himself. "There is not much to tell. I was born in Texas, grew up on a small ranch, got married young. My wife died of fever when we were both 18. After that, I worked cattle drives for about 10 years, saved my money, and finally bought that land in Knight's Ferry 3 years ago." "You were married," Deanna said softly. "I am sorry, that must have been terrible." "It was a long time ago," Michael said, though the pain of it still felt fresh sometimes. "I have made my peace with it, mostly. What about you? What was your life like before your father died?" "It was good," Deanna said, a wistful note in her voice. "My father's store did well. We lived in a nice house in San Francisco. I helped him with the books and the inventory. I thought maybe someday I would run the store myself, though I knew that was not very realistic. Women do not typically run businesses alone." She laughed bitterly. "I had so many foolish ideas back then." "They were not foolish," Michael said. "You should have been able to run that store if you wanted to. You were clearly capable." "Thank you for saying that," Deanna said, and in the firelight Michael saw tears glistening in her eyes. "Garrett told me constantly how stupid I was, how incapable. After a while I started to believe him." "You are not stupid," Michael said firmly. "You got yourself out of an impossible situation. That takes intelligence and courage." Diana looked at him for a long moment, and Michael felt something shift between them, some invisible barrier falling away. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he carefully put his arm around her. offering warmth and comfort without demand or expectation. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers, and Michael felt something he had not felt in years. A connection to another person, the possibility that he might not have to be alone forever. They extinguished the fire and moved on through the night, climbing higher into the mountains. The air grew thin and cold, and both of them struggled to catch their breath. But when Michael checked his compass by moonlight, he was satisfied with their progress. They were well north of Knight's Ferry now, on a trajectory that would take them down the western slopes of the Sierra Nevada toward Sacramento. On the third day, they sheltered in a dense grove of pine trees, and Michael allowed them to rest longer, knowing they were far enough from Garrett's reach now that they could afford some recovery time. Deanna's hands and feet were badly blistered, and Michael tore strips from his extra shirt to bandage them. She winced but did not complain, and he found himself admiring her stoicism. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Deanna asked as he wrapped her feet. "You could have given me some food and sent me on my way, but instead you are risking everything to help me." Michael considered the question. "I suppose because I know what it is like to feel helpless," he said slowly. "When Mary died, I was helpless to save her. I watched her slip away and could not do anything about it. Maybe helping you is a way of making up for that, I do not know. Or maybe it is just that you remind me that there are still things worth fighting for in this world." "You loved her very much," Deanna said softly. "I did," Michael admitted. "But that was 12 years ago. I have spent those years alone telling myself I was content with solitude. But maybe I was just afraid to care about anyone again, afraid of losing them the way I lost Mary." "And now?" Deanna asked. Michael looked at her, really looked at her. Even exhausted and disheveled, with dirt on her face and wearing his oversized clothes, she was beautiful. But more than that, she was brave and resilient and kind. He had watched her share the last of her water with an injured rabbit they had found on the trail yesterday, carefully tending to it before setting it free. He had heard her singing softly to herself during the difficult climbs, keeping her spirits up. He had seen her smile despite everything she had endured. "Now I think maybe I am ready to try again," Michael said quietly, "if the opportunity presented itself." Deanna reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I was so afraid when you found me in that barn," she said. "I thought you would be like Garrett, that all men were like him, but you have shown me that there are still good men in this world, men who are gentle and honorable." "I am not special," Michael protested. "You are to me," Deanna said, and she leaned forward and kissed him softly. Michael froze for a moment, surprised, then returned the kiss, his hand coming up to gently cup her face. It was tender and sweet, nothing like the desperate or demanding kisses he had experienced in saloons over the years. This felt like a promise, like the beginning of something real and lasting. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I am still married," Deanna said regretfully. "This is not proper." "We will fix that," Michael said. "We will get to Sacramento, get you divorced, and then we can do things properly. If you want to, that is." "I want to," Deanna said, smiling through tears. "More than I have wanted anything in a long time." They held each other for a while longer, then forced themselves to eat and rest, knowing they still had a long journey ahead. But something had changed between them. Where before there had been caution and careful distance, now there was warmth and possibility. They caught themselves looking at each other, smiling for no reason, hands finding excuses to touch. The fourth night brought them down from the high mountains onto lower slopes covered in oak and grassland. The weather was warmer here, and the walking easier. They made good time, and by dawn they could see the Sacramento Valley spread out below them, the river glinting in the early morning light. "We made it," Deanna said in wonder. "We actually made it." "Not quite yet," Michael said. "We still need to get into the city and find Judge Harrison. But yes, the hard part is over." They rested through the day in a stand of oak trees, then continued their journey as dusk fell. By midnight, they reached the outskirts of Sacramento, a city of several thousand people that seemed impossibly large and bustling after the isolation of the mountains. Gas lamps lit the main streets, and even at this late hour there were people moving about, heading to or from saloons and gambling halls. Michael found them a cheap hotel on the edge of the city, paying for 2 rooms with some of his carefully hoarded savings. The clerk gave them strange looks, clearly wondering about a man and woman traveling together and wanting separate rooms, but Michael did not care. Deanna needed a proper bed and a chance to clean up before they approached Judge Harrison. In the morning, Michael left Deanna at the hotel and went searching for the judge. It took most of the day, asking questions at various government buildings and law offices, before he finally tracked down Judge Harrison's residence, a modest house in a respectable neighborhood. The judge himself answered the door, a tall man in his 60s with gray hair and keen blue eyes. "Judge Harrison, I do not know if you remember me. Michael Dalton. We met a few years ago over that property dispute in Knight's Ferry." Recognition dawned in the judge's eyes. "Mr. Dalton, yes. You were claiming adverse possession on that parcel of land, if I recall. We ruled in your favor. What brings you to Sacramento?" "I need your help," Michael said. "A woman's life may depend on it." Judge Harrison studied him for a moment, then stepped back from the door. "Come in. Tell me what is going on." Over coffee in the judge's parlor, Michael explained everything. Finding Deanna in his barn, her bruises and fear, Garrett Lewis and his hired guns, their flight through the mountains. He spoke carefully, trying to present just the facts without embellishment, knowing that judges valued truth over emotion. When he finished, Judge Harrison was silent for a long moment. "These are serious accusations," he said finally. "Do you have proof of this abuse?" "Deanna still has bruises," Michael said. "I saw them myself. And there is the fact that she ran away in terror. What woman would do that if her husband were not genuinely dangerous?" "Many husbands would argue that wives need discipline," the judge said carefully. "The law gives men considerable latitude in how they manage their households." "The law is wrong," Michael said bluntly. "No one deserves to be beaten for burning a roast or speaking to a stranger. That is not discipline, that is cruelty." Judge Harrison smiled slightly. "I happen to agree with you, Mr. Dalton, but my personal opinions are not always reflected in the law. However, there are provisions for divorce in cases of extreme cruelty. If Deanna is willing to testify and if her injuries support her claims, I might be able to grant a dissolution of the marriage." "She would testify," Michael said. "She wants to be free of him." "Bring her to my courthouse office tomorrow at 10 o'clock, Judge Harrison said. "I will hear her testimony and make a determination. But I warn you, Mr. Lewis will have the right to contest this. If he can produce witnesses who say Deanna is lying, or if he can prove she has been unfaithful, the case will be dismissed." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. What would count as unfaithful? Running away with another man could be construed as such, the judge said delicately. "Particularly if she was seen staying in your home or traveling alone with you. I am not saying I would rule that way, but other judges might. You need to be prepared for that possibility." Michael thanked the judge and left, his mind troubled. He had not thought about how their flight could be used against Deanna, twisted into something improper. But he supposed it did look bad. A woman leaving her husband and running off with a strange man. Never mind that it had been innocent, that Michael had been nothing but honorable. Garrett Lewis and his lawyers would spin it however they needed to. He returned to the hotel and found Deanna waiting anxiously in the lobby. He explained what the judge had said, watching her face fall as she realized the complications. "Maybe we should not do this," Deanna said quietly. "If it backfires, Garrett will never let me go. He will make my life even more miserable than before. Or maybe Judge Harrison will see the truth and grant the divorce," Michael said. "We have come too far to give up now." That night, they had dinner together in a restaurant near the hotel, sitting at a corner table where they could speak privately. It felt strange to be in civilization again after days in the wilderness, strange but also wonderful. Deanna had used some of the money Michael gave her to buy a simple dress, and she had washed and styled her hair. She looked beautiful, and Michael could not stop staring at her. "What?" Deanna asked, smiling self-consciously. "You are just very pretty," Michael said, feeling his face heat with embarrassment. "You are sweet," Deanna said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "I keep thinking about what happens after tomorrow. If the judge grants the divorce, what then? I would be free, but I would still have no money, no home. Garrett will probably fight to keep everything that was my father's." "You could come back to Knight's Ferry with me," Michael said. "I know it is not much, just a small ranch, but you would be welcome there. And in time, if you wanted, we could make it official. Get married, I mean, if that is something you would want." Diana's eyes filled with tears. "Are you proposing to me, Michael Dalton?" "I suppose I am," Michael said, suddenly nervous. "I know we have only known each other a few days, and maybe it is too soon, but I have never felt this way about anyone except Mary. You are strong and kind and brave, and I think we could build a good life together. But if you need more time to think about it, I understand." "Yes," Deanna said, tears streaming down her face now. "Yes, I will marry you. I do not need more time. You have already shown me more kindness and respect than Garrett did in 6 months of marriage. I know you are a good man, Michael, and I want to spend my life with you." Michael felt like his heart might burst. He came around the table and kissed her, not caring who might see, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. "We should probably wait until after the divorce to get married," Deanna said practically. "Otherwise it might cause legal problems." "Yes, definitely," Michael agreed. "But after that, we will do it right. A proper wedding with a preacher and everything." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, imagining their future together. Deanna talked about learning to ranch, about maybe starting a small business in Knight's Ferry if the town needed something. Michael described the mountains around his property, the way the snow looked on the peaks in winter, the wildflowers that blanketed the meadows in spring. It felt impossibly good to have hope again, to think about a future that was not just solitary survival, but actually building something with another person. The next morning, they arrived at the courthouse at the appointed time. Judge Harrison met them in his chambers, a wood-paneled room lined with law books. He asked Deanna to describe what had happened during her marriage to Garrett Lewis, and she did, her voice shaking but clear. She detailed the beatings, the verbal abuse, the constant fear she lived in. She rolled up her sleeves to show the fading bruises on her arms, the marks around her throat from where he had choked her a week before. Judge Harrison listened without interruption, his face grave. When Deanna finished, he asked a few clarifying questions, then sat back in his chair. "I have heard enough," he said. "Based on your testimony and the evidence of your injuries, I am prepared to grant a dissolution of your marriage to Garrett Lewis on grounds of extreme cruelty. The decree will be final in 30 days. Deanna let out a sob of relief, covering her face with her hands. Michael put his arm around her shoulders, feeling his own relief wash over him. They had done it. Deanna was free. "I must warn you," Judge Harrison continued, "that Mr. Lewis may attempt to contest this ruling. He has 30 days to file an objection. If he does, there will be a formal hearing where both sides can present evidence and witnesses. But I will note in my ruling that I find your testimony credible and supported by physical evidence. That should carry weight even if there is a contest." "Thank you, Your Honor," Deanna said through her tears. "Thank you so much." They left the courthouse feeling like they were floating. Deanna was smiling for the first time since Michael had met her, a genuine expression of joy that transformed her whole face. They celebrated with a nice lunch at a proper restaurant, then spent the afternoon walking around Sacramento, just enjoying being together without fear or urgency. "We should probably head back to Knight's Ferry soon," Michael said as they watched the sun set over the Sacramento River. "I've been gone almost a week now. I need to check on my animals and property." "I know," Deanna said, "but I have been thinking. Maybe I should not go back there with you. Not yet, anyway. If Garrett is still in Knight's Ferry, seeing me would only enrage him further. Maybe I should stay here in Sacramento for the 30 days until the divorce is final." Michael did not like the idea of leaving Deanna alone in the city, but he could see her point. "What would you do here? Where would you stay?" "I could find work," Deanna said. "Maybe as a seamstress or a shopkeeper. And I could stay at that hotel or find a boarding house for women. I would be safe here, Michael. Garrett would not dare do anything in a city this size with so many witnesses around." "I do not want to be apart from you," Michael admitted. "I do not want that either," Deanna said, taking his hands. "But we need to be smart about this. Once the divorce is final and we are married, Garrett will have no legal claim on me anymore. Then I can come to Knight's Ferry as your wife, and there is nothing he can do about it." Reluctantly, Michael agreed to the plan. They spent one more night in Sacramento, this time in the same room, though they maintained propriety by Michael sleeping in a chair while Deanna took the bed. In the morning, Michael helped Deanna find a respectable boarding house run by a stern-looking widow who assured him that no men were allowed past the parlor, and that all her girls were properly chaperoned. "I will write to you," Michael promised as they said goodbye. "And I will come back in 30 days to get you. We will get married here in Sacramento, then travel back to Knight's Ferry together." "I will count every day," Deanna said, kissing him one last time. "Be careful, Michael. Garrett may try to take revenge on you." "I can handle Garrett Lewis," Michael said with more confidence than he felt. "You just focus on staying safe here." The ride back to Knight's Ferry took 3 long days. Michael pushed hard, eager to check on his property and make sure everything was all right. When he finally rode up to his ranch, he found Sam Wheeler sitting on his porch with a rifle across his knees. "Welcome back," Sam said. "I took the liberty of keeping an eye on your place. Good thing, too. That Lewis fellow came by twice looking for you. He was not happy when I told him I had no idea where you had gone or when you would be back." "I appreciate that, Sam," Michael said, dismounting. "How are my animals? Fed and watered. Lost a chicken to a fox, but everything else is fine." Sam studied Michael carefully. "You want to tell me what this is really about?" Michael considered lying, but Sam had been a good friend and deserved the truth. He explained everything, watching Sam's weathered face grow darker as the story progressed. "That son of a bitch," Sam said when Michael finished. "I knew there was something off about Lewis. He has that look, you know, like he thinks he is better than everyone else. His wife got free of him. She will be in 30 days once the divorce is final," Michael said. "Then she and I are getting married." Sam let out a low whistle. "You do not do anything halfway, do you, son? Well, congratulations. She sounds like a fine woman, but you need to watch your back. Men like Lewis do not take losing well." Sam's words proved prophetic. 2 days after Michael returned, Garrett Lewis showed up at his ranch with his hired guns. But this time, Michael was ready. He met them on his porch with his rifle in hand and Sam Wheeler standing beside him with his own weapon. "Where is she?" Garrett demanded without preamble. "Where is my wife?" "Not here," Michael said. "And not your wife much longer, I hear." Garrett's face flushed red. "You think you are clever, Cowboy, running to Sacramento, getting that bleeding heart judge to grant a divorce. I have already filed a contest. I will drag this out in court for years if I have to. Deanna will never be free of me." "The judge saw her bruises," Michael said quietly. "He heard her testimony. You are not going to win this, Lewis." "Maybe not in court," Garrett said, his eyes cold, "but there are other ways to win. Accidents happen to people who interfere in other men's business. Barns catch fire. Cattle wander off. People sometimes just disappear in these mountains." "That sounds like a threat," Sam Wheeler said. "And making threats in front of witnesses is not too smart." Garrett looked at Sam, seeming to notice him for the first time. He smiled coldly. "No threat. Just observations about the dangerous nature of frontier life. You should be careful, Mr. Dalton. Very careful." He turned his horse and rode off with his men, but the menace lingered in the air like smoke. Michael knew the threat was real. Men like Garrett Lewis, used to getting their way, could be dangerous when thwarted over the next few weeks. Michael lived in a state of constant vigilance. He checked his property every morning for signs of sabotage. He slept lightly, waking at every unusual sound. He made a point of being visible in town, making sure people knew where he was, creating witnesses to his continued survival. He wrote to Diana every few days, long letters describing life on the ranch and his plans for their future together. She wrote back with equal frequency, describing her work as a seamstress in Sacramento and how many days remained until they could be together. Her letters were filled with warmth and love, and reading them was the highlight of Michael's days. True to his word, Garrett contested the divorce. Michael received a notice that there would be a hearing in Sacramento in 2 weeks to determine the final disposition of the case. He packed his bags immediately, eager for any excuse to see Deanna again and to end this situation once and for all. When he arrived in Sacramento, he went straight to Diana's boarding house. She flew into his arms when she saw him, and he held her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling her heartbeat against his chest. They had been apart for less than a month, but it had felt like years. "I missed you so much," Deanna said, her face pressed against his shoulder. "I missed you too," Michael said, "but this will all be over soon. After the hearing, we can get married and never have to be apart again." The hearing was scheduled for the next day. Judge Harrison presided, and Michael was pleased to see him look disapprovingly at Garrett Lewis when the man walked into the courtroom with his expensive lawyers. Garrett looked smug and confident, clearly believing his legal team would overturn the divorce ruling. The lawyers argued that Deanna had abandoned her husband without cause, that she had run away with another man, that her testimony about abuse was fabricated to justify her infidelity. They produced witnesses who claimed to have seen Deanna and Michael behaving inappropriately in Knight's Ferry, though Michael had never seen these people before in his life and suspected they were paid to lie. Then, it was Deanna's turn to testify again. She sat in the witness chair with her back straight and her voice clear, repeating everything she had told the judge before. Garrett's lawyers tried to shake her testimony, asking aggressive questions and trying to make her seem like a liar, but Deanna did not waver. "Look at my neck," she said at one point, pulling down her collar to show the faint scars where Garrett had choked her. "Look at my wrists. These marks do not lie. Your client is a violent man who beat me regularly. Running away from him was not abandonment. It was survival. Michael was asked to testify as well. He described finding Diana in his barn, her terror and desperation. He explained their flight through the mountains, making it clear that his behavior had been honorable and that his only intention was to help a woman in danger. "Did you develop romantic feelings for Mrs. Lewis?" Garrett's lawyer asked. "I did," Michael admitted. "But not until after we knew she would be free of her husband. I never acted inappropriately while she was still married." Finally, Judge Harrison called for closing arguments. Garrett's lawyers made an impassioned speech about the sanctity of marriage and how easily it could be dissolved if judges believed every unhappy wife's tales of abuse. Then the judge turned to Michael and Diana, neither of whom had lawyers. "You have anything to say, Mrs. Lewis?" he asked. Diana stood. "Your Honor, I stand by everything I have said. My husband beat me, terrorized me, and made my life a nightmare. Leaving him was the hardest and bravest thing I have ever done. All I want is a chance to live in peace, to build a life with a man who treats me with kindness and respect. Please do not send me back to him. I am begging you." Judge Harrison was silent for a long moment, looking at Garrett Lewis and then at Diana. Finally, he spoke. "I have reviewed the evidence and heard the testimony. Mr. Lewis, your lawyers have made their case, but frankly, I find it unconvincing. Your wife has visible scars consistent with her claims of abuse. Multiple witnesses, including Mr. Dalton and the boarding house matron where Mrs. Lewis has been staying, attest to her good character. Meanwhile, you have produced witnesses who seem to have appeared out of nowhere and whose testimony contradicts itself in several key areas." He shuffled his papers. "More importantly, I spoke with several merchants in Knight's Ferry after the initial hearing, people who knew you and your wife. They confirmed that Mrs. Lewis often appeared with bruises, that she seemed frightened, and that you were known to have a violent temper. Based on all of this, I am denying your contest. The divorce stands. Mrs. Lewis is free of you, effective immediately." Diana collapsed back into her chair, sobbing with relief. Michael put his arm around her, feeling his own eyes burn with tears. Across the courtroom, Garrett Lewis was purple with rage. "This is not over," Garrett hissed as he stalked past them. "You have both made an enemy today." "No, it is over," Judge Harrison said firmly. "And Mr. Lewis, I am going to make sure every judge in California knows about this case. If you try to harm either of these people, if you make any more threats, I will personally see that you are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "Do I make myself clear?" Garrett did not answer, just stormed out of the courtroom with his lawyers hurrying after him. Michael barely noticed. He was too busy holding Diana, who was crying and laughing at the same time. "I am free," she kept saying. "I am actually free." "You are free," Michael confirmed, kissing the top of her head. "And tomorrow, if you are willing, you can become Diana Dalton." They were married the next day in a small ceremony at a church in Sacramento. The preacher was a kind older man who had heard about their case and agreed to perform the ceremony for free. Sam Wheeler had made the trip from Knight's Ferry to stand up for Michael, and the boarding house matron stood with Diana. It was a simple wedding, nothing like the elaborate affair Diana had endured with Garrett, but it was filled with genuine love and joy. "I, Michael Dalton, take you, Diana Lewis, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise to honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I, Diana Lewis, take you, Michael Dalton, to be my lawfully wedded husband," Diana said, tears streaming down her face. "I promise to love you, support you, and stand by your side through whatever comes. You saved my life, and I will spend the rest of my days showing you what that means to me." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Michael kissed Deanna, it felt like the beginning of everything he had been searching for since Mary died all those years ago. A second chance. A new start. A reason to hope. They spent their wedding night in the best hotel Sacramento had to offer, a luxury they could barely afford, but that felt necessary to mark the occasion. Deanna wore a simple white nightgown she had sewn herself, and Michael was struck again by how beautiful she was, how lucky he was to have found her hiding in his barn that night. They made love slowly and gently, both of them nervous but eager. For Deanna, it was a revelation that physical intimacy could be tender and mutual rather than something to be endured. For Michael, it was the overwhelming joy of being close to someone again after years of loneliness. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, talking and laughing until they fell asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, they began the journey back to Knight's Ferry. Deanna rode behind Michael on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, her cheek pressed against his back. The ride took 3 days, but neither of them minded. They were together, they were married, and they were heading home. When they finally rode up to Michael's ranch, Deanna looked around with interest. "It is beautiful here," she said. "The mountains, the trees, it feels peaceful." "It is our home now," Michael said. "Yours and mine together. We can make whatever we want of it." Sam Wheeler had left the house clean and the animals well tended. Deanna walked through the small cabin, examining everything with the eye of someone planning improvements. "We could add a room," she said, "and maybe a proper kitchen instead of just cooking over the hearth, and I would love to have a garden come spring." "We will do all of that," Michael promised. "Whatever you want." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Michael worked the ranch while Deanna kept house, but it was nothing like her life with Garrett. Michael treated her as an equal partner, asking her opinion on decisions and valuing her input. Deanna proved to be a quick learner, soon helping with the animals and even learning to ride her own horse. They saw Garrett Lewis one more time, about a month after their return to Knight's Ferry. He was leaving town, loading his belongings into a wagon. When he saw Michael and Deanna riding past, his face twisted with hatred, but he said nothing. They later learned from Sam Wheeler that Garrett had sold his lumber mill at a loss and was moving back to San Francisco. Good riddance, Michael thought. That first winter was hard but happy. Snow fell heavy in the mountains, and there were days when they could not leave the cabin. But Michael did not mind. He and Deanna spent those days talking, reading aloud to each other from books she ordered from Sacramento, and making love in front of the fire. Deanna's laughter filled the house in a way that made Michael realize how silent and empty his life had been before. In spring, Deanna planted her garden and also announced that she was pregnant. Michael was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. He had never thought he would be a father, had given up on that dream years ago. Now it was becoming reality, and he found himself simultaneously excited and worried about everything that could go wrong. "We will be fine," Deanna assured him, rubbing her barely visible belly. "Women have babies every day, and I am strong. I survived Garrett. I can survive childbirth." She was right, though Michael still paced anxiously outside their cabin while the midwife from town attended to Deanna one October morning in 1877. When he finally heard the cry of a baby, he rushed inside to find Deanna exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny infant wrapped in blankets. "We have a son," she said. "A healthy, perfect son." Michael took the baby with trembling hands, staring down at the small face. His son. He had a son. "What should we name him?" he asked. "I was thinking James," Deanna said. "After my father, James Dalton." "James Dalton," Michael repeated, testing out the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, James. Life with a baby was exhausting but wonderful. Michael found himself waking in the middle of the night not to check for threats, but to watch his son sleep, marveling that this tiny person existed because of him and Deanna. Deanna proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving even when James cried for hours or refused to sleep. They expanded the cabin that summer, adding a second bedroom for James and a larger kitchen for Deanna. Michael's ranch was doing well, his cattle bringing good prices at market, and he found he could afford small luxuries now. Store-bought fabric for Diana's dresses, toys for James, even a piano that Diana had always wanted to learn to play. Time passed in the way it does when life is good. James grew into a bright, energetic toddler, then a curious boy who followed Michael everywhere around the ranch. Deanna gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah in 1879 and another son named Thomas in 1881. Their cabin grew again to accommodate the expanding family, and what had started as a simple 2-room structure became a real house with a proper parlor and dining room. Michael and Deanna fell more deeply in love with each passing year. They had the kind of partnership that came from surviving hardship together, from choosing each other every single day. Michael never raised his voice to her in anger, never lifted a hand against her. Deanna never had to walk on eggshells or fear what mood she would find her husband in. Instead, they laughed together, worked together, and built a life that was richer than either of them had ever imagined possible. Sam Wheeler became a fixture in their lives, an honorary grandfather to their children. He taught James to ride and to rope cattle, and he told the younger children wild stories about the old days that had them wide-eyed with wonder. Michael was grateful for Sam's friendship, for the way the older man had stood by him when Garrett Lewis made his threats. The children grew healthy and strong in the mountain air. James developed his father's quiet strength and his mother's intelligence. Sarah was gentle and creative, always drawing pictures or making up stories. Thomas was the wild one, fearless and energetic, keeping his parents on their toes. Michael loved them all fiercely, amazed every day that he had been given this second chance at happiness. Diana thrived as well. She started a small business making dresses for women in Knight's Ferry, her skill with a needle becoming well known. It gave her independence and pride, and Michael encouraged her every step of the way. He loved watching her work, the way her face concentrated when she was fitting a pattern or choosing fabric. They never heard from Garrett Lewis again. There were rumors that he had remarried in San Francisco and that his new wife had left him after 6 months, but Michael did not know if that was true or just town gossip. He did not particularly care. Garrett was part of Diana's past, and they were focused on their future. As the years passed and the children grew, Michael sometimes thought about that October night in 1876, when he had found a terrified young woman hiding in his barn. If he had made a different choice, if he had sent her away or turned her over to the sheriff, his life would have remained small and lonely. Instead, that moment had opened up a world of possibility, leading him to love and family and a richness of experience he had thought lost forever when Mary died. "What are you thinking about?" Deanna asked one evening. They were sitting on their porch watching the sunset, their children playing in the yard. James was 15 now, nearly grown, and the younger 2 were running around catching fireflies. "Just how lucky I am," Michael said, taking her hand. "How one night changed everything." Deanna squeezed his fingers. "You changed everything for me," she said. "You gave me back my life, my freedom. You showed me what it meant to be truly loved and respected. I will never stop being grateful for that." "I am the grateful one," Michael said. "You brought light back into my life after so many years of darkness. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to look forward instead of back." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. James called out something to his siblings, his voice cracking in that awkward way of teenage boys. Sarah laughed at whatever he said, and Thomas tried to jump high enough to catch a firefly that was just out of reach. "We did good, did we not?" Deanna said softly. "We did very good," Michael agreed. As the stars came out one by one, the Dalton family went inside for dinner. The table was crowded and noisy, with the children talking over each other and Deanna laughing at their stories while she served the food. Michael looked around at his family, at the life they had built together, and felt a peace settle over him that went bone deep. He had found her hiding in his barn, and she had whispered, "Please do not send me back." He had not sent her back. Instead, he had helped her find freedom, and in doing so, he had found his own freedom from a past defined by loss and loneliness. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love that had weathered threats and hardship and come out stronger on the other side. Years continued to unfold like the pages of a well-loved book. James grew into a fine young man and eventually took over much of the ranch work, allowing Michael to slow down as his body aged. He courted and married a girl from town, bringing her to live on the ranch in a small house they built nearby. Sarah became a teacher in Knight's Ferry, beloved by her students for her patience and creativity. Thomas, true to his adventurous nature, joined a survey team mapping the territories to the east, though he always came home for Christmas. Michael and Deanna grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces acquiring the lines and creases of a life well lived. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1902, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and half the town of Knight's Ferry. Someone asked Deanna to tell the story of how she and Michael met, and she did, her voice still strong despite her years. "I was hiding in his barn," she said, "scared and hurt and desperate, and this tall cowboy found me with his lantern, and instead of turning me away, he helped me. He risked everything to give me a chance at freedom and happiness. That is the kind of man Michael Dalton is. That is the kind of man he has always been." Michael felt his throat tighten with emotion. He looked at Deanna, at the woman who had transformed his life, and saw not the frightened girl from the barn, but the strong, capable, beautiful person she had always been underneath the fear. She had not needed him to save her, he realized. She had already saved herself by choosing to run. All he had done was stand beside her and support her while she claimed the life she deserved. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," Deanna replied. "Always have, always will." They danced together that night, slow and careful, their movements no longer as fluid as they once were, but still perfectly in sync. Their children watched with tears in their eyes, seeing in their parents' relationship a model for what marriage should be: partnership, respect, unwavering support, and deep, abiding love. Michael Dalton died peacefully in his sleep in 1909 at the age of 63. Deanna held his hand as he slipped away, their bedroom filled with children and grandchildren saying goodbye. He went with a smile on his face, surrounded by love, his last words a whispered thank you to the woman who had given him 33 years of happiness. Deanna lived another 5 years, staying in the house they had built together, tending her garden and making dresses and spoiling her grandchildren. She told stories about Michael constantly, keeping his memory alive for the younger generation who had not known him well. She spoke of his kindness, his strength, his unwavering integrity. When Deanna died in 1914, at the age of 61, she was buried beside Michael in the Knight's Ferry Cemetery. Their children placed a single headstone over both graves with an inscription Diana had requested. Together we found freedom. Together we found love. Together we built a life. Together forever. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passing from James to his children and then to theirs. The story of Michael and Deanna became family legend, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But the core remained true. A cowboy had found a frightened woman hiding in his barn, and instead of sending her back to danger, he had helped her escape. That choice had rippled out across decades, affecting countless lives, proving that one act of kindness and courage could change everything. In the end, what Michael and Deanna built together was more than just a ranch or a family. They built a legacy of love and resilience, showing everyone who knew them that it was possible to overcome even the darkest circumstances, that second chances were real, and that true love existed if you were brave enough to reach for it. Their story became a reminder that in a harsh and often unforgiving world, there were still good people willing to stand up for what was right, still opportunities for healing and growth, still reasons to hope. The cowboy had found her hiding in his barn, and she had whispered, "Please do not send me back." And in that moment, both of their futures had changed forever, spinning out into a beautiful shared life that neither of them could have imagined in that first frightened meeting. And though they were gone, their love story lived on, passed down through generations, inspiring others to be brave, to be kind, and to believe that even in the darkest moments, help might be just around the corner, in the form of a lantern light in a barn and a gentle voice saying, "I will not send you back. You are safe here. Everything would be all right," and it was.